Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, folks, to the OKD Community Development Meeting for February 6th of the year 2024. And I think we'll probably just jump right into the project board unless anyone has any announcements that they want to make or anything that they want to draw to our attention.
Yeah, Jamie, if you don't mind,
Yeah, go ahead.
before we start. Basically, from an internal meeting, you remember I mentioned something about the OKD sort of containers that are leaking RHEL artifacts. So we had an internal meeting, and the guys were asking so basically, we want to find out from you guys if anyone would be interested in helping out, because we need to fix it before we can carry on with any more releases. So our directors have asked if we can stop doing OKD SCOS, and I would imagine FCOS releases. I see Dennis is on the call, so I think he's going to be leading the initiative. And so basically what it is, we're going to obviously do an investigation to find out which containers in the release are affected. Once we have that list, then find a way of actually building it, maybe using our infrastructure that we have already, MOC, Tecton. Well, I mean, the details we can work out. And the thinking was to mutate the Docker files that are in the repos, rather than trying to go to each repo, update the Docker files for OKD. So in other words, in our pipeline, mutate the Docker file, build whatever's needed from scratch, hopefully using maybe SCOS as a bit. I don't know, those details we can get into. So I don't know, Dennis, do you want to add more stuff into that?
Sure. So the issue is because all the containers that go into OKD are coming from from OpenShift, and they're not using UBI. They're using the extended life cycle support version, which it has content that RHEL content that has been updated and is not covered by the UBI licensing. And so we will need to change the base of every container, to use something, potentially we can use UBI and they'll follow along, like 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, etc. as UBI is updated. An area where we're not entirely 100% sure and 100% clear on is, like some of the networking containers are pulling in extra content from RHEL, and which ones there are going to need more work. Like the containers that are just building from Go, we could probably just switch to UBI, but we may be better off just switching everything to SCOS, and that way we could pull it in. We don't know exactly how much work is involved in changing the containers, but it's pretty clear that we need to change the containers that we're using for the base for OKD, because they're currently, they've got the extended life cycle support. Like some of them are still on 8.6, and 8.6 is not, UBI is end of life. It's currently 8.8 or 8.9 is the most current version of 8 that's in UBI, and UBI follows along the RHEL releases, and OpenShift does not. So there's a change there, and we will need to rebuild all the containers and work out the best way to do it. And I think it is a place where we can change some things and have community engagement, and how it looks going forward and what's in there.
I'm interested in participating for sure.
Yeah, I just want to. Sorry, I was just going to say one thing, Luigi. I think this could follow the same approach that we're thinking about with the operators, where we want to build operators, where we actually have a repository for each Red Hat artifact we want to build, which contains a patch file. So it contains a link to the original repository and then a patch file. And I think that would be a good way then that we could then patch the Docker file or any of the other files that we need to, and then we run a build within the Tecton infrastructure. So I could see this. We can create a common pattern that will solve both the operator and this use case, where we take a package, we have a local patch that we have in an OKD repo, which will then build that component using a Tecton pipeline. So I think there is some synergy here with the work that we're kicking off for the operators as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, makes sense. So basically, it's really saying, you know, it would really be. I think it would be a worthwhile and beneficial effort from the community to get involved, and then basically we have full control, and then there's not this digging into Prow doing builds for us, but we have now full control over OKD artifacts from releases to day 2 type operators. So yeah, so it's actually good. So you guys are okay with that? Basically, that's what we wanted to hear.
I think so, and I think well, actually, Zed, did you have your hand up and take it down, or did you still have something? Go ahead.
I did have something, but I can't remember what it was now. I put my hand down.
Okay. I think this is a good idea, and I think we could actually create a project in the GitHub to document the work and actually make it a community thing where volunteers are added to it, et cetera, et cetera. And so it looks like we've got Dwayne is interested, I'm interested. Is anyone else interested in participating in this effort? Bruce, are you raising your hand because you're interested or because you have something to say?
I just had something to add
Sure.
because furthering my limited investigations on the operator front, what I found was that we were basically restricting things to Intel architecture. And so I suggest that our new thing work for Arch64 as well. And I mean, if you look at the things that are in key, they all, you know, like the various base containers are available for about 4 different platforms, including I think, you know, like IBM 360, whatever, PPC, and so on and so on. That would probably be hard for us to test, but I think we could do you know, Intel and ARM. And that would be basically, that would cover most of the PCs, most of the desktops, PCs, laptops that people have, so that we would open it to more of the community.
I think that's good as a phase 2, I think, right? So phase 1 would be just getting through this, and then phase 2,
Sure,
adding
fine.
architectures. Yeah, Zed, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I remember what I was wanting to talk about was just the volume of components which actually go into an OKD or an OpenShift release. And I'm just slightly nervous that if we are maintaining a patch set for what could probably get into 3 digits worth of repos, I'd imagine, in terms of by the time you've gotten into all the network operators, all of the cluster components, you know, console, all that kind of stuff. It's console plugins, you know, it is a lot. And I come from a Minecraft modding background. We run all of our core code basically patching and modding Minecraft. Building that into a reliable, robust workflow is well, keeps me up at night. I you know, the best case has, you know, I think we should look at where we can have compatibility in the upstream repositories and the component repositories, where you know, I'm assuming there will be, you know, I'll go for it, cluster network operator, which is on all the clusters. I'm assuming they probably build off a Red Hat image or whatever. The easiest thing would, if they could build off UBI, sure, it would make sense for them to build off UBI as well, because I would assume Red Hat would still make sense for OpenShift, and then we just don't have the problem of polluted builds. But I feel if we're trying to maintain a separate build system with a separate build base, there's going to be all sorts of potentially missing packages with slightly different names. Like if we're on, on what we were talking about, with, I don't think SCOS has like a Docker image. I know Fedora does, but package names can be slightly different. That complicates patches, especially if it's like you're changing one package name in a long line with lots of them. It's how do you handle the conflict down the line? I really think we should try and fix it at upstream if possible, rather than have 105 patch files. And I guess it's just, and I think that would be easier for everyone involved, including Red Hat, in the long run. Brian's nodding.
Working for a large global corporation, in theory, that sounds wonderful, but I'm guessing the political logistics to try and make that happen within Red Hat are going to be just as difficult as it is if I was to try to do that within IBM. But I'm looking to the Red Hatters to actually give a comment on that, but that would be my feeling.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Zed, you're 100% right. It makes sense to do the original repos upstream for us, really, to update there. But I think the amount of work, because remember, we've got to update then all the different, we work on branches. So we have 412, 413, 414, 415, 416, and I mean, that's just a ton of work. Plus upfront, we've identified two really difficult ones, which would be the OVN and HA proxy. I mean, those two already, there's work and hard work behind that. Never mind all the other ones that are sort of Go based and are not C++ or whatever it is. Yeah, so it's not a trivial task, but I think it is achievable. So yeah, I don't know, Dennis, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely achievable, and it's not trivial. I think it will lead things to more community input on everything, which is a good thing, I guess. As an introduction to myself, I know I came last week, and for the first time I was asked to come along. But for years I was involved in Fedora as a release engineer for Fedora. I've been at Red Hat for just over 15 years now. There definitely seems to be a political desire to change inside of Red Hat how OKD is set up at the moment, and this happens to fit quite nicely into the need for change. I would hope that it's easier to do something like this in Red Hat than in IBM, but that it's not going to be a matter of just saying, hey, we need this and getting it. Some of it may require us to get a little creative in how we get resources. I think adding ARM is certainly going to be a lot easier than adding P&Z. I happen to manage the team that enables OpenShift for ARM Power and Z, as well as some of the x86 platforms. So I know I have contacts with people inside of IBM that are interested in having OKD for P&Z as well, just for completeness sake, and in order to they want to do things that Red Hat doesn't really want them to do, and OKD may be a place to do that.
So I mean,
I think it's
I think someone mentioned that we wouldn't be able to do any new OKD releases until this is fixed. I'm just conscious that there could be a lot, potentially it could easily be months to go through and actually get a full pipeline out of it.
So the discussions we had, I think what we can continue to do is the 4.15 based stream of updates, but not necessarily anything newer and anything older, just to minimize the exposure for things, but to move forward and to get things going, we'd want to have a clear defined 416. We're gonna take some steps to solve the problem. So yeah, it's not like there would be no updates, but no like 416.
Can I just clarify the scope of the problem? Is it just with the SCOS, or does this also impact the Fedora-based OKD?
It impacts both bases because it's not to do with the core OS at all. It's not to do with the operating system running on the container, on the host. It's to do with the content that is shipping in the containers that is making up OKD, where they're using the extended lifecycle support base, which has content that we can't just make available.
And is it just related to the base image that the containers are built on, or is there other IP that's pulled into the packages as they're built?
Both. So the base that they're using is kind of locked to older versions of RHEL, which are the extended support, rather than using UBI that follows along. And some containers, like networking in particular, happens to pull in other pieces of software that ship from RHEL and probably shouldn't have actually been shipped, period, as part of OKD, because they're pulling content that comes from outside of the repositories that make up UBI. So it's ultimately the base. The easiest, probably the easiest and best way to deal with it is to change the base to something newer. The base could be, for many, could be UBI, but in some instances where they're pulling content outside of what's in UBI and in the UBI repos, that base would need to change. Like maybe we could change most of them to UBI 8 or UBI 9, and that would be fine, because and following along with the UBI stream of updates will be fine, because everything in that container comes from the repos that are okay for UBI. But some of them will need extra work because they're pulling things that comes from outside of that UBI content.
Okay, and then I guess the killer question: have you identified any content that can't be built from an open source source? Is there any Red Hat proprietary content that's not in the public domain?
There is no such thing as Red Hat proprietary content.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
The acquisitions that Red Hat has done in the past, where we acquired proprietary content, we open sourced all of it.
Okay.
Like if you look at the 389 project, it was Netscape Directory Server. When Red Hat acquired that, it was all proprietary, and Red Hat open sourced and made all of that available, and that has been what Red Hat has done. So there is no proprietary code inside of Red Hat.
Excellent. So it's certainly possible that we can do this. It's just the amount of work and the amount of resource we have to pull in. Okay.
Yep. Zed, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess, so in some of the work I've been doing on operators, I've noticed that some of the Docker files in the upstream repositories have had like the from Golang CI builder dot, and obviously an internal Red Hat thing, which we've just replaced and then not really had any issues with. I guess the first scope of work will be figuring out what's polluted. And I'm wondering if any of you folks at Red Hat know of a lovely audit tool where you can kind of give it, basically, I guess we'll need to look at an OKD payload and inspect all the container images, and for each of those container images, list their packages and see which of their packages are coming from RHEL repos. I mean, I can probably think of a bash script which would do that, but I was wondering if you had a lovely tool internally, because it sounds like something you might have.
Yeah, already we have Vadim that's done some extensive work using Python he's got something out there that extracts and looks at the packages and that type of thing. So identifying which packages, I think that will be done internally. And then once we have a list, a curated list of what needs to be done, what packages are affected, so on and so forth, we'll sort of maybe put that in a repo or whatever, and then or in the project list, and then say, okay, this is how we're going to divide and conquer, and 2-3 guys are looking at, you know what I mean? But those are the details we can work out later. I mean,
yeah, and that's
just getting a heads up. First of all, heads up for you guys, and then just say it would really be cool to get a sort of collaboration effort from the community on this.
And I think we can. I don't want to speak, but I mean, there's lots of people raising their hands and shaking their heads. So I think, yes, we're interested in doing that. I think what we would ask is that as soon as that list is identified, that, yeah, it gets added to a page within, we'll create a project specifically for this in the OKD Proj GitHub. And so within that sub-project, we'll create a page, and then please populate that page with all of those that need to have their images changed and or content. And then the working group can then divvy up that work, and folks can volunteer and whatever. And this will be, you know, as they say, eating your own dog food. So we've wanted to have community ownership for a long time. This is going to lead us there. And so now we have to actually do it.
And I think to Brian's point as well, I think it might be a high priority to get this done.
You're breaking up a little bit, Luigi. Is he breaking up for anyone else? He's freezing and breaking up for me. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to turn your video off, Luigi, so we can hear the audio? Oh, I think he's gone.
I think he completely froze. Yeah.
So, I mean, Jamie, I suggest that we put this project ahead of the operator project.
Yeah.
And sort of freeze that one, because I mean, it'd be great if we can get the upstream projects to adopt whatever approach that we want to propose. But assuming that we can't, I think then it is going to be very much the same approach as the operator. So then the operator work will flow on from this work. And I think it's probably a good idea to try and pull in Vadim and unify the SCOS and FCOS, finally trying to get rid of those magic bits that Vadim can add to actually do a Fedora release.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that we probably want to put more of our eggs in the SCOS basket than the FCOS basket. My sense is that's, yeah, Zed, go ahead.
I was just curious. I mean, we run FCOS for our cluster, and I saw SCOS kind of came out last time. I was curious really on the rationale for SCOS over FCOS for your use case.
So the people's individual use cases I can't speak to, but the general gist is that, you know, SCOS is going to be sort of it's positioning itself to sort of be the upstream in the same way OKD is the upstream. Ideally will be the upstream of OCP. And the way that CentOS has repositioned itself in the past year in particular sort of lends itself to that, where things that we suggest we can give back to the community, and things that benefit OKD we can get into the SCOS build easier than I think the FCOS build. SCOS is more directly linked to OKD, my sense is more directly linked to OKD, whereas the FCOS effort, they've said, we're not specific to OKD, we're not specific to any Kubernetes distribution, we are just an OS for running containers on. right? And so, yeah, Dennis, go ahead.
I think there's pros and cons to both. Yeah, ASCOS is closer to RCOS. It in that, you know, ASCOS Core OS stream, CentOS stream is, you know, the next version of RHEL in development. So what's going into, you know, ASCOS right now is the latest CentOS stream. It's closely matches what will be in RHEL 9.4, and there's less of a jump in the content between SCOS and, you know, RCOS, and so it more closely mirrors. And I think for a lot of people that holds some appeal. In the case of, you know, Fedora, you know, one of the benefits of Fedora is that it follows upstream much more closely. Eventually, it's going to land into RHEL, but, you know, like the content that is in Rawhide right now is probably going to make RHEL 10 not, you know, it's not, some of it may make it to RHEL 9, but it's much further out in the future. But, you know, there is the benefit that Fedora regularly follows upstream. I run Fedora on my laptop and desktop, and, you know, I got a 6.7.3 kernel installed on my desktop today, and so you're getting, you know, like the latest and greatest. So, you know, for some people, FCOS would come in very handy because they're, you know, got hardware that isn't supported by, you know, RHEL, and doesn't have the, you know, the support in that kernel in, you know, SCOS even. And, you know, to get, you know, to take advantage of particular hardware features, you could, you know, using FCOS gives you easier path to adoption, where, you know, SCOS is essentially a little more stable, and, you know, things are not going to quite change quite as quick, you know, from there. As it comes to OKD, a large part of the where you get tripped up, or where you potentially, you know, run into issues, I think is not so much with the core OS. You know, you've got the kernel, you've got, you know, Podman, and, you know, the kubelet and stuff that is probably not really all that different between the two. You know, SCOS will have a slightly older kernel and potentially more stable, and, you know, slightly less features because it uses a config that mirrors the RHEL, you know, the RHEL config. Yes, you're more likely to run into, you know, like using Fedora in the containers that you're building OKD on. You're more likely to run into changes that break things because, you know, Python changes and Go changes more quickly, and some of the, you know, the tooling and the libraries change more quickly. But as it comes to, you know, the OS on the container, you know, host, it probably, you know, doesn't make as big a difference whether it's FCOS or SCOS. Honestly, I don't think.
Okay, that's fair enough. I just, as I know on our website at the moment, it still feels like FCOS is the default. And I think if you follow the getting started guide, you probably end up with an FCOS install. And well, like I said, we run FCOS without too much issue at the moment. But it's just curious. Thanks for the explanation from everyone.
One of the things I think from a community support model is it'll be a little bit easier for us to provide community support of SCOS than the FCOS base, just because it'll be a little bit closer, because it's closer to RHEL releases. We'll probably have more people familiar with it and be able to extrapolate a little bit more in terms of, you know, helping folks in the community out in working with it. That's just my sense. I don't know, but we'll see. Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just throw in a user comment, because I've sort of been, you know, running OKD with FCOS And because of the sources of the two, I mean, like at the time that I started, FCOS was it. There were no alternatives. And I have been bitten by some kernel bugs that got finished with the absolutely latest kernel. And so, there have been just I would say day to day, there's not a huge difference, but once every couple of years, you may run into the issue that Fedora is basically the leading edge distribution, and sometimes you do bleed, but you also get the latest and greatest, which often you don't care about. SCOS is based on the more conservative version, and so in a way, philosophically, it's sort of more in line with a sysadmin type system where you want your system to work. So like I am actually running one system on Core OS 7, which I'm going to have to do something about, I think, in June when the EOL kicks in. It's running a version 3 kernel, and it works perfectly. Never had any problems with it. So it's sort of a risk-reward trade-off in a way. How stable do you need to be? How much do you want to see the latest things? That's sort of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, and I think that's valid I agree with that. And I think that stability will come into play if we want to position OKD to be something that people can use in their data centers in something other than just sandboxes playing around or the occasional company. We've got a lot of stories of folks that play with it and use it in sort of limited scope. But if we want to really get it out there and get it used, ultimately it does have to have some stability. That, at least that's my thought on it. So anyone else have any thoughts?
I think it's worth just talking about the comment that Leroy put in the chat. If we are going to start doing a community build, we do need to understand what level of sort of conformance testing needs to be put in place. I'm imagining today that's all behind the Red Hat firewall within Brow. So do we have any thoughts about how we pull that into a more open platform? Do we have to re-implement it, or can we just lift and shift? But given that we're going to be based on a Tecton environment where the Red Hat build is a Prow environment, I'm guessing we definitely do need to do a comprehensive test suite before we can actually put any of the content we're going to change live.
Elmiko, do you have a response or a new item?
No, I was going to respond to what Brian is saying.
Yeah, go for it.
So yeah, like I agree with you, Brian. Like we definitely need to do testing, and there's a lot of different ways we can look at this. So I'll start with let's just talk about conformance testing. Let's talk about what if we produce an OKD image, we can launch a cluster with it, and then we could run an application to say, yes, this is a conformant cluster. There's a tool we have called the OPCT that we've created, the OpenShift, what do we call it? Performance certification tool or something, or partner certification tool. This is a tool we developed to work with our partners who are building integrations through our external platform. And so when a partner is able to deploy the cluster on their infrastructure with whatever modifications they've made through the external platform API, they would then run this tool last. And if this tool, achieves greater than a certain level of success, then we say, yeah, this cluster is behaving the way we expect OpenShift to behave. That tool's open source, we can use it. And I would recommend that would be one of the tests we should have as just a smoke test to say, okay, you've installed this cluster. Does it behave the way that Red Hat would expect? And, we'll have to kind of say the OpenShift, the OKD community would expect that this cluster should. So that's one level of testing, kind of behavioral, to make sure that it's doing what we expect it to. And then the next layer deeper of testing, which I think you were kind of starting to talk about, like this kind of thorough testing, is, what we call the end-to-end, our integration testing that we do inside Red Hat. All those tests are also open, but yes, in order to maximize our use of them, we would need to replicate kind of the PROW infrastructure, which, could be done, but we would need to replicate that so that we could consume the same kind of, artifacts to kick the tests off at least. And I think that would be an interesting approach to this, like getting those tests running and everything. But we'll have to be ready for the second part of that, which is it takes a lot of effort to like understand like when those tests fail, to understand if the failure we're seeing is like an actual failure or a flaked failure. And then there's the response part of it. Are there going to be OKD community members who are attempting to solve these problems in OKD land? Or are we gonna have a policy where we say, look, when we detect bugs that are coming through our release mechanisms, we take those back to Red Hat and open bugs upstream, or do we fix the OKD release? So I think there are some interesting questions that we have to solve, but we could, as a first target, get to the point where we're saying we're building an image, we're automating the installation of a cluster, and then we're automating the run of this OPCT, because that could all be done with like Ansible or Bash scripts or something like that. That's like an entry point we could come in at.
Exactly, I fully agree. And I think it has to be done almost a one-click install for a development environment, because if we want community support, we can't expect them to create a PROW instance within their private environment. And all of I know that that's not a trivial task. I've looked at PROW and gave up on it, if I'm honest. So I think we do need, I think part of this is going to be, which is something I have been trying to look at for the operator work. I'm trying to do it with customize. So I run one customize command on top of something like a kind cluster, and that gives me everything Tecton. It gives me all the tools, all the tasks, all the I can install all the sort of pipelines and the Tecton tasks all within the cluster. So it's a one command, gives me my development environment. So I think we need that, but I think that then has to be extended to a part two, which is a one-click command to set up the test environment. So I can then kick that off with a one command, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I've seen other Red Hatters do this kind of thing through like GitHub workflows, right? So like if we had an infrastructure available that we could deploy OpenShift to, we could use a GitHub workflow to kick off like a cluster launch and test run. So like it's possible that this could all be done through like GitHub's mechanisms if we wanted to. But we would need to have the kind of that substrate, we would need to have like an AWS account or an OpenStack instance or something that we could automate the deployment of the cluster to.
So like, I guess that leads to a question I was going to ask down the road. Do we want to shop around to get some underwriting support to pay for some AWS? Are we at that point where we can say, hey, we've got a plan, are such and such companies interested in throwing down some ducats, some dollars for us to have some AWS resources that we could spin up a cluster and run tests against?
Or do we have that? Do we have that capability within the existing open?
I think we can only. My understanding is we can only do build stuff, but I think Luigi would have to speak more to that, or Dennis. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Amazon has a history of providing free credits for open source and upstream projects. Like if you're selling it, then all bets are off. But they provide a lot of AWS credits and resources for Fedora for things. So you may be able to just go to them.
Yeah, and also the CI/CD GitOps businesses might be interested in supporting us, since we're talking about things like getting Tecton on there and utilizing Tecton and Argo and stuff like that, and integrating some of these, you know, CI/CD and GitOpsy tools. We might be able to hit up those companies as well. So I know that there are folks that have offered, like Blaze isn't here, but Blaze offered some hardware up and stuff, and it sounds good, and maybe we can do that to get started. The problem is if that person has to leave the community, or they win the lottery or get abducted by aliens, like suddenly your infrastructure for deploying and testing is gone, right? And it would be really unfortunate for us to get into that situation. So maybe we could do that in a very short term, but I think maybe in the next meeting or two, if we could come up with a plan and a pitch and approach some of these companies and get some AWS. I did the math, and to keep a cluster up all the time, it's a couple $100 for your 3-node, your 3 control plane and 3 worker node OKD cluster. Just installing right in and letting it run completely for a month, it was like 200 and some odd dollars. So if we're just spinning stuff up and testing against it and bringing it down, obviously that's going to change a little bit. So,
yeah, I mean, I think if you're running a CI and CD pipelines on it, you're going to need pretty massive nodes to get anything looking like reasonable performance. I think you'd probably need to times your number by 10 to get to what you'd be looking at for a monthly bill.
So is the general consensus, yes, that we want to reach out and see if we can get some support? Show of hands.
Virtual, I think it's essential. If we're going to take this on as a community, it's essential that we have the resources to be able to do it. And especially, as Almiko said, if we want to replicate the full system test, we're not going to be able to do that on someone's laptop in their home. We are going to need the full pipeline support, the automation support for those activities.
All right. Well, then let's add that as an agenda item for the next meeting, is to actually start working on, and we can do this asynchronously as well. I'll drop something in the dev channel and start working out a pitch. And obviously we're going to also need to have our plan for swapping out the images as well, like ready to go, because if you start taking people's money, you need to be able to show them something pretty quickly to show that you're actually making use of it. So it'd be nice to, pretty quickly follow up with results for that. And yeah, the testing tool conversation, we also had we were going to do a demo in terms of Dagger as something that folks would be able to spin up personally to use for testing and whatnot. And Blaze was going to give us a demo of Dagger at some point. We'll pin him down to a particular day, particular meeting, and have him come, because he's been using Dagger to spin up OKD. So, all right. Is there anything else on this topic that we need to do? We have our work cut out for us. So I'll create the repo for this image replacement project. We'll start working asynchronously on some materials to provide to possible supporters. And is there any other to-dos to come out of this right now? And testing tools, obviously. Yeah. So three to-dos.
So Luigi, Dennis, how much effort is going to happen within Red Hat? Are we going to have 2 parallel teams working on this, an internal and an external team? Or can we try and get this all done within one team?
I think it should all happen within one team. There shouldn't be two separate efforts.
Right. And do you have any idea of the size of the? I think when I run up a cluster, I get 63 containers, but I'm guessing that that's made up of lots of individual pods. Do we have a number? Again, I think Zed sort of mentioned that it could potentially be over 100. So
depends what. It also depends what environment you deploy into, because there's supporter images for
cloud and stuff.
Yeah, autoscalers and things.
Yeah, I think, to be fair to Dennis, a number is probably like, let's let whatever tool that they can use for the Deems tool or whatever to actually get the list, and then we'll go from there, because we don't know, right? And I don't think that they know, so I think trying to pin anyone down on a particular number might be kind of hard.
Sure, it's over 100, but I don't know.
I think the other conversation for the community would probably be just on the what the base image looks like. If we base off UBI, which we could do, but UBI is in a somewhat odd licensing position, I know, and that it's not like they're not like fully open source binaries. But I'm not sure if CentOS Stream actually ships a base container image. I know Fedora does. I don't know how difficult it would be to create one for CentOS Stream, but I think I had a look the other week and I couldn't find something obvious, but it might be hidden in somewhere on Key or something.
I'm pretty sure that there is a CentOS Stream container.
Yeah, I think there is. I think I've used it.
I mean,
where
it's listed on the download page. It's pushed into Quay. If you go to CentOS.
I'm happy to be wrong then. I'm happy to be wrong. That's fine.
Download.
Oh yeah, you're all right. I see it now. That's fine.
All right. Dennis, can we expect your glorious presence at a few future meetings moving forward, since you seem to have a lot of knowledge?
I will be attending what I can going forward.
Excellent, thank you. All right, anything else that folks have on this particular topic? All right, thank you, Dennis, for your guidance and your help in this and getting us sort of where we want to go and ultimately where Red Hat wants to go as well. So,
sorry, I just had one more question that I put in the chat. I don't know if we saw it, but the question is, if the community does produce new base images for all the OKD components, will Red Hat continue to cut new versions of OKD using the community built images, or is the expectation that the community takes over cutting releases of OKD?
I think that I mean, from my perspective, I think that should be done within the community, and Red Hat is likely to have someone that is engaged and involved in that process.
Currently,
Sorry, go ahead, Luigi.
Yeah. So currently, we OKD SCOS releases. So we do that on a sprintly basis. So every 3 weeks, where we do try, and obviously we'll make that available to the community. Actually, is available. We just need to make sure that this problem goes away. And then anyone's welcome to run it, the OKD, running it in collaboration with MOC, Massachusetts Open Cloud. And maybe they could also help us with giving us
Luigi, you're breaking up pretty bad, so we're only getting like bits and pieces of this. So maybe type it out.
On as well. I mentioned earlier on.
got the general gist, right? So it looks like we could do right, exactly. It looks like MOC might be able to help us out on both fronts in terms of resources. Anything else that folks want to say to this? The gist is, just to reiterate what Luigi said, the SCOS based releases will continue to be community provided, which they have been for months now. So that's not going to change. That's not going to get internalized into Red Hat or anything like that. So conceivably, that at least will continue to be to the community. I think the issue on the FCOS side is still that the build is happening on Prow with Vadim's special sauce. And so all of that would need to get reworked to make that done via the community, right? So for the community to do FCOS based OKD builds, we're going to have to massage some things a little bit and get some help from internal folks, I think. I don't think Vadim has all the time to do it himself completely. So I don't want to speak for him, but that's my sense, right?
And I guess just to add to that, we possibly need to, down the road, look at how we communicate the build, the failures, because I'm not sure the SCOS yet feeds into those pages yet, where we actually have all the update information, the releases page, where the Fedora ones do. So we may have to look into that side of it as well. But I think that's definitely a phase 2, phase 3 type problem to solve rather than.
For sure. And I want to loop back to something that there was sort of a branch conversation, which actually would be branching, was we would make a decision on if we make a change, does that go upstream and we try to get Red Hat to make that change, or do we just patch it ourselves? I think the ultimate goal would be that we get Red Hat to make those changes and we make those changes and we become a true sort of upstream, as it were, or true sister distribution. Patches maybe in the short term, but I mean, it'll probably depend on what the issue is. But, patches when necessary to get something out the door. But ultimately, I think trying to get those changes implemented upstream so that we do position ourselves more and more as sort of the lead in this, feeding into OCP, right? And feeding into RHEL, as the case may be, right? Anything else? All right. Yeah, go.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yeah.
well, I just want to say, first of all, guys, I missed y'all. It's been a little while. I may have an operator's resource. I've been on a lot of OpenShift Commons meetings since December. I think we've had one presentation actually from IBM on operators, working with the platform engineering. So I'll try to put that in Slack. I think we may have that presentation where you can see would that add value to the conversation. And so I'll put that in the OKD Slack so you can peruse it.
Cool. All right. A couple of other things we didn't get to in this meeting today that we will at the next meeting is the survey. Maybe we'll do this asynchronously, but we need to get the survey out the door sooner than later, I think, particularly as we try to sort of have more community control over what OKD is. This is an opportunity to find out what the community wants to help sort of direct things as well. So I've got a new item that was added to the planning board that is Survey 2024. If someone wants to get involved with that, it's number 42. Please let me know and I'll add you to it. Right now, it's just me. And I do have in that item a link to the last year's survey. And we do now have number 27, the single node installer. Peter Roth stepped up for number 27 and is also got some other tickets that he wants to take from us as well. He can't attend the meetings again, I mentioned before, but Peter Roth is like really into helping out with OKD. So we should make him hip to these conversations as well. and try to include him in anything that you think he might be interested in participating in. So just tag him in the dev channel. And and for folks that are watching this, and maybe for folks on the call that aren't aware, we do now have the OKD-dev channel on the Kubernetes Slack. So please join that if you are interested in getting involved in OKD development. All right, I think we're at the end of the meeting. Thanks so much for your time, folks.
Just one thing, just on the operator project. I'd be quite keen to keep going with it just because I need it I need it anyway. So we're going to be building a catalog anyway, and I'd rather build it open source. So like,
Right.
yeah, like we'll probably keep cracking on with it. I actually stood up a catalog today in the OKD project. It's empty at the moment because I didn't want to put my hacky stuff into it, but I'm writing a bit of an install guide on how you can stand that up, and then we'll probably bring over an ODF, so an OKD storage, and a few other operators into it first.
So if you feel that you can keep hacking away at it and keep everyone informed and pull in people, if you could lead the initiative on that,
Yeah,
to keep
that's
it.
fine. That's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just quite keen that we don't stall it just because
Absolutely.
we're
I just don't
working on
wanna
it.
get
So yeah.
You know, and I think, Brian, your thought also is if we're spread too thin, we're not going to get some stuff done. Right?
Yeah,
So,
agreed.
okay, cool. All right. Thank you so much, folks. See you in the channel and look for the asynchronous work to be done. See you.
Thank you. Bye.